GWATA TV gives you a first look at North Central Washington's business news. You'll hear from our local business, tech, and education companies as Jenny discusses hot topics and current events with some of the best innovators and pioneers in North Central Washington.
Hello, North Central Washington, and welcome to GWATA TV. I'm your host, Jenny Rojanasatian, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. On today's episode of GWATA TV, I've invited the Regional Port Authority to come on air and to talk about the work that they're doing, the consolidation, and how they support economic development across North Central Washington. Stay tuned, we'll be right back with our first guest. Welcome back to GWATA TV. I'd like to introduce our first guest for today's episode, Jim Huffman, a commissioner with the Port of Douglas County. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Jenny. Good to be here.
I'm excited to get to spend some time with both you and Commissioner Turner later on to talk more about the regional port's work. But let's start with you and your background, because you've been in our community for many years serving in different capacities. Let's start with your career. Can you give us a little lay of the land?
Sure. I started working for Chelan PUD in 1964. Rocky Reach Dam was like just a year old at that time, and I was fortunate to get a job there as tour guide. So that tweaked my interest in the electric power business right off the bat. And I did that up until that, and worked in the engineering department as a student trainee up until about 1968, and that was right in the middle of the Vietnam era. And I'd been going to junior college and was kind of undecided which way I wanted to go after that. And so I wasn't ready to go back to the four-year institution yet, so I enlisted in the Navy. I beat the draft. And through that process, got great opportunities to travel and great training in electronics. And I was.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
Oh yeah, certainly.
Thank you for your service.
I was fortunate enough to be on the ground floor of the introduction of the integrated circuit, which in today's terms means ASIC boxes, application-specific integrated circuits that are used in the blockchain and locally here for crypto mining. So I got great training there, and then after I finished my stint in the military, 2 tours in Vietnam, then I was able to go back to school to Central. And because of the traveling I'd done and the things that I saw, decided that it was appropriate for me to get a degree in environmental science. Which I did. And at that time, too, it was appropriate training because the utility was in need of somebody to manage their environmental affairs at the utility. And so I crafted an interdisciplinary major on environmental science and tuned it to the needs of the electric power business. And then after graduation in '74, went to work full-time for the PUD and had worked there up until about 2000. And had a great run there. I started out as, like I say, as the environmental manager, but things in the power business were changing because that was the early '70s, and the region was looking at prospect of having a shortage of energy, and so there was a lot of scrambling going on to build new resources, and that's where the WHOOPS projects came into being. So I got assigned to work at least part-time with the organization with WHOOPS. And helped planning for several nuclear plants around the region. Of course, we all know the fate of the supply system, that they essentially were overbuilding because the concern about energy and availability really kind of swept the country, and including in the Northwest, people caught on to the notion of how important conservation was. And so the demand for energy actually went down and obviated the need for 5 nuclear plants. So, and then that evolved into working on Regional Power Act, which was designed to how to equitably allocate resources around the region, if in fact we did have a shortage. And so that was a very complex set of legislation, a very tumultuous time in the utility business. A lot of changes, followed Bonneville Power contracts and rate cases. So I got a good firm understanding of how power flows and money flows through the system. As a result of that experience, and then worked on all the relicensing of the hydro projects, which steeped me very heavily into regulatory affairs.
You know, Jim, when we were preparing for this interview and you sent me the list of your career,
I know.
You've had a very robust dynamic, and done some really incredible things in energy, environmental compliance.
Yes.
And now, you know, as we kind of start, now you serve as a commissioner in the Port
Yes.
of Douglas County. So let's kind of transition there in terms of your vast experience. How's that prepared you for your role as a commissioner and in that service?
Interestingly enough, being the first guy in town to have an environmental degree, I got tasked in the private sector to write environmental impact statements, because I was the only one on the list at the county that was authorized to write those statements. So I got involved with a lot of private sector projects in addition to PUD projects. So that introduced me to a lot of different kinds of businesses, which was in the long term very helpful for me. Mike was first appointed to the Port Commission in Douglas County in 1994 as a result of my predecessor decided to quit and moved out of town. He ran on the platform that he wanted to abolish the port. And there were folks in the community that understood what the value of having the port was and did not want to see that kind of an attitude carried forth. And so I was recruited by a banker and owner of an engineering firm that wanted to see somebody that was going to be more proactive with regard to port activities. So I applied and got to fill the unexpired term of my predecessor in '94.
So you got recruited into the position, but have been elected and been serving since then. And that importance of the ports and the port role, that just only continues to grow because, you know, I'd like to touch on the regional port consolidation.
Yes.
And that consolidation, I'd love to have you walk us through it, is really about the port making an even bigger impact, right?
Right.
Okay, tell us about that. So what is the Regional Port Authority, when did that happen, and what does it mean for our community?
I'd like to say that I would like to credit ourselves with being brilliant and genius,
Okay.
but sometimes...
So modest.
Oh, yeah.
So modest.
However,
okay.
a lot of things are born of necessity, and the consolidation of the port effort was one of those. You know, a lot of things evolved and happened at the airport, which caused the cost to go up very significantly. 9/11 was a big game changer for the industry at large, and certainly no different here. We got saddled with a lot of unfunded mandates, with fencing around the airport, with heightened security, et cetera, and that drove the costs into a category of where it was very difficult, if not impossible, for the Port of Douglas to keep up. And so we wrangled with that for quite some time and decided that the best course of action, since we were already partners in the airport, was to be more officially partners.
Okay.
And not necessarily divide the burden, but share the burden in a different way, which really makes a lot of sense.
And the port running the airport, and the airport being one of the most important assets we have
Absolutely.
in the region.
Yeah.
In an economy and landscape where it's countrywide, they're shutting airports down,
Yes,
right?
they are.
Yes.
Airports our size typically are shutting down.
Yeah.
We've been lucky in that we've been able to keep our airport afloat.
Mm-hmm.
We have a very good relationship with Alaska Airlines. We don't set the schedule, though. Alaska does that.
Okay.
But so long as we're keeping the boardings up and above like 75%, we can have some assurance that they will continue to increase service into our community,
Okay.
which is great.
So really born out of the airport needs,
Yes.
the ports looked at consolidation.
Yes.
And when did that take effect?
It actually officially just took effect first of the year.
Okay.
So we're brand spanking new.
And how's it going?
It's going great.
Okay.
I think that, you know, we didn't necessarily have all the foresight that we would like to have had. However, things are really kind of turning our way. There's a lot of diversity between the two counties, Chelan and Douglas County, geographically and economically. But as a collective whole, we have much more to offer as far as creating job opportunities in our community. Chelan County is about 85% federally and state owned, and so there's not a lot of available developable land in Chelan County. Douglas County is quite the opposite, and so it will take collaboration between the two to continue to perpetuate and sustain economic growth in our community.
And that economic growth, job development,
Yes.
creation is really important to the port.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about that in terms of recent context, Douglas PUD went through a rate change process, and
Yes.
the regional port decided to voice and get involved. Tell me why. Why was that important for the port to get involved?
We're talking about a convergence of some very rapidly changing industries. Not only in the data world, things are changing very quickly there and have for quite some time, but also in the power world, things are changing very dramatically. And so trying to combine the changing landscape and take advantage of that as we move forward. The Northwest has played a really important role historically in providing power to aluminum smelters. By the same token, the aluminum smelters played an important role in sustaining the power system in the Northwest. They used a large amount of power, but in exchange for that, they agreed that 25% of their load would be interruptible. I think we're moving toward an era now where the crypto miners, for example, could be in a similar situation as the aluminum industry had been in providing that kind of reserve back to the system. So basically what it boils down to is that when the region is running at normal, or maybe even a little better than normal, then there's plenty of power available to serve all those loads. There are periods now, and things are changing because of wind and solar and other resources coming on, where that consistent pattern is not necessarily there. So there's an opportunity for those loads to curtail in times when power values become really high, and also still provide a stream of revenue back to the utility when power values are low. So it's kind of it could be used, if done correctly, as a good adjunct to the power system.
And the power supply is obviously a driver of large industries in our
Yes.
community, not just crypto miners,
Right.
but data centers.
Data center is very important.
Manufacturers. There's a lot of industries who are using power.
Yes.
And need that in order to grow and,
Right.
and drive development.
Well, including the new fruit warehouses.
Right.
They're very large and consume a great deal of energy. There's a lot of automation going on, not only there but in other industries, and it all is driven by the availability of energy.
Right. Well, obviously, your vast experience in energy provides you a lot of insight into the conversation and being an advocate.
And I know how an ASIC box works.
Right. Well, Jim, we are going to head out here soon in a minute and
Sure.
bring Commissioner Turner on air. I just want to give a little chance to have, you work not only, obviously, as a commissioner, but you're also serving with the Economic Development District
Yes.
and some other boards. Tell us a little bit about some other projects that you're passionate about.
The North Central Washington Economic Development District has been around for quite a while. It's gone through a couple of evolutions in the stream of funding, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's primarily a recipient of funding from the Economic Development Administration, a federal system program, and uses that money to stimulate and promote job growth we're rural counties, essentially. And so we just finished a tourism summit where we brought folks together from across the region to talk about tourism in our community, and ag tourism was right up there on top. We got to sample a lot of locally sourced food products, which was great. That was the entire menu.
Well, that's always nice when you can mix in local foods, right?
Oh, yeah.
Local experiences into a mix.
We didn't have wine, though.
Okay,
unfortunately.
all right.
However, the EDD also provides an economic summit where we bring folks together across the region, Chelan, Douglas, and Okanagan counties, to talk about what the prospects and opportunities are, and the opportunity to network and work more closely together. We've been doing that for some time. We do a ranking project. Folks submit ideas they have for projects across the region, and then we provide kind of a base ranking for those to assist them in getting outside funding, either low interest loans or grants, to pursue various kinds of economic development.
So whether it's through the Regional Port Authority or
Yes.
through the EDD,
Right.
you are an advocate and champion for a development, so thank you.
Yes.
And people can connect with you probably at both organizations.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Probably the easiest way is go on the website for the port.
Okay.
And my number's there and my email address.
Okay.
So I'm always interested in feedback from folks around the community.
Perfect. Well, thank you for all the
Sure.
work that you do, Jim.
Sure.
We have to head to a commercial break, but we'll be right back after this. We're back on air on GWATA TV, speaking with the Regional Port Authority. And next up, we have Commissioner Turner. Thank you, Rory, for coming on air with us today.
Nice to be here, thanks.
I've not had the opportunity to interview you before, so it's exciting.
Cool. Yeah, good to be here.
For those of you who may not be familiar with you, give us a lay of the land. You've been very involved in real estate in North Central Washington, so can you share a little bit about your background?
We moved our family here back in the mid-90s. We just wanted a different place, a slower place, and a fun community to be part of. And so we landed here. We loved it, and we've been in love with it ever since. So we began to buy projects, kind of put partnerships together and buy buildings, really focus on renovation, really focus on historic renovation, actually in the last 10 years or so. So done a number of those, and it's been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of success here locally, so yeah.
Well, I know you've worked very closely with the Chamber and the Downtown Association and also the Main Street project, not just locally, but nationwide.
Right. So Main Street's really important. I was a Chamber president and got involved that way, but Main Street I've been involved with even when I didn't have any properties in downtown. I had properties over in East Wenatchee, but I was involved in the Main Street program here in Wenatchee. I've had the opportunity to speak at the national convention. I go around the state and work with some smaller communities. It's one of those passion things, and I've been fortunate enough, my background, I have a lot of now experience in construction and marketing and tenant mix and things that some people don't really talk about and consider. So when I go to these small towns, I share that, and sometimes it just takes a spark to get things going. And so that's what we like to do. It's more of a passion than anything else.
Yeah, because it's not just about leasing a spot. It's about creating an environment where commerce can happen, right? And bringing people to one of these historic buildings.
Well, you create a tenant mix, and by that I mean you bring different people in, different businesses in. They have to work together, and they have to live with each other. And the better job you do of that, the better and more successful the group is, and the more longer they will want to stay. So it's pragmatic, but it's also the right thing to do. So that's why we do it. Yeah.
And now you serve as a Port Commissioner, and you were elected. Remind me, in what year?
So elected in 15, started the service in 16. So this is my 4th year, or I guess 5th year going in. I have 2 more years this year and next year. So it was something that I didn't really expect to do. I was asked to do it and was quite reluctant. But it has been one of the most challenging and rewarding positions I've ever had. It's been amazing, actually. It's been incredible.
Well, thank you for your service in this role. And as I was talking with Commissioner Huffman earlier, a lot of it's about economic development, right?
Yeah.
And driving growth, which is something you obviously have some pretty incredible experience doing in terms of real estate. The port just consolidated, and we kind of touched on that. How's that consolidation going from your perspective?
I think it's great. I have learned a ton from the Port of Douglas folks. I couldn't be happier with the way it's going. We're lucky to have Jim Kuntz there, and the staffs. When we consolidated, it just worked. And the vision now is so different. We go from the top of Stevens Pass to Grand Coulee Dam. I mean, we're the largest in the state, in terms of geography, and it's just a marriage of 2 great. We don't have a lot of land in Chelan County, but we were very well capitalized, and they had struggled in the past for capitalization. They have less population and less dollars to work with, but they have a lot of land, and so it was like a no-brainer. We had a great committee that helped us, and boom. So now we're here, and now we're having a great time. This is fun. We're doing a lot of good things. So.
And you've got some pretty big projects coming down the horizon, such as the recent property purchase, the Lineage property. Can you, for those who are not familiar, where is this property located, and why the purchase?
Well, I'll do this very quickly because you can get into the weeds on this. But if you're in Wenatchee and you're on Wenatchee Avenue and you want to go to Pybus, you take a left on Orondo and you come down and you get to Columbia Street and you look up and there's a warehouse on your right and a warehouse on your left. Well, it's all of those warehouses. It's about 160,000 square feet. Just real briefly, Lineage owned it. And they put their entire portfolio on the market, both the south project, that one, and the north project, which is up by the, sort of next to the PUD on the other side of the tracks. It languished on the market for a year or so, and so the city and the port got together for different reasons to say, why don't we, make an offer on this? And so, what started at 13 million, we ended up at about half that number, and we wanted the south half, and we ended up with that at really good rates. And the whole purpose of this is to, get it back in private sector's hands, and that's the point I need to make, is we are looking to get this into private sector to do things that aren't being done here yet. I mean, we need, as we all know, that we have gaps in recreation and entertainment, laser tag and trampoline parks and things like that. So we are encouraging that sort of business to come in. Part of these buildings are still going to be industrial. So, we'll have a working warehouse district, but we're in the design phase now to do a design overlay and kind of meld this all together. It wouldn't surprise me if we had offices, maybe some residential, but it's adaptive reuse, and this is just going to be fun. This is really a game changer for the Valley.
So when you talk a little bit, for those who are not aware, the ports have the authority to purchase property and help develop it, right? That's one of the, I guess, main pillars that ports are able to bring growth to a community, because they can buy properties and help get them to the point where, like you said, private sector can come in.
Right.
So will you be doing a lot of the construction and the rehab, or are you looking for private partners along the way?
It'll be a combination of both. The port's very unique. We have the largest port association in the United States. Washington is very unique, and we have some very unique laws that support us and ask us to do this. But we're public works, so we'd rather have private sector do this. But some of this needs to be done by us. But then, each building is going to be separate, so each of them have to be treated separately. But we're hoping, keep our fingers crossed. We're hoping to get the first group of buildings on the market as early as April, maybe. I mean, this is record speed, but
that's pretty fast.
Yeah. No, we want it back out there, so we want them working for us.
So if there's a business or an entrepreneur listening in, reach out to the port if you're interested in finding out more about not only this property, but the portfolio properties, right? That the port is involved with.
Yeah, absolutely. We want involvement, and this is going to be a work in progress. We're going to put this out, and we're looking for ideas. We're going to do an RFP out there. We want some ideas. We want you to come to us. You just know we want to build jobs, and we want to fill the gap. We want to create things that don't. We want this to be a regional impact. We want people that are visiting Leavenworth or Chelan to take a day and come down here and go to the trampoline park or the batting cages or whatever it is. This is the whole intent, is to create that regional center for visiting visitors.
Yeah, and just adding to that lifestyle amenities.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, kind of to transition off regional and the core of, I guess, business commerce, you also do a lot for rural communities, right? I mean, we're of course considered rural in Wenatchee, but we're talking about some really smaller towns that have much lower infrastructure and population. Can you talk about what the port does for some of those communities?
So we have an initiative, and we've when we got the two ports together, what we didn't want to have happen is forget people or communities like Mansfield and Bridgeport and Waterville on that side. We're working with, we actually have a coalition getting together for Stehekin to do some work with them. We think that we can provide some assistance. But we're having some fun right now is we're going up, in fact, in 2 weeks we're going to Waterville, and we're going to meet with the leaders. We're going to take a look at a couple of buildings. How can we help them? Can we, part of what we can do is provide studies. Part of what we can do is provide advice. Personally, I love that town and I love those buildings. So I'm going to bring my passion up there and sit down with them and say, if I had this is what I would do. But there might be an opportunity for the port to buy something there and kind of create some jobs and do some things. Same thing up in Mansfield, down in Bridgeport. We've already given them a grant to do some things for wayfinding and other things. So yeah.
So you really have the whole region in mind.
Oh, absolutely.
And trying to provide that support. Well, thank you, Rory, for coming on air to share more. We do have to head out for the day, but I want to encourage you to connect with the Regional Port Authority. They have new offices out near Pangbourne Airport. All of the information on Commissioner Turner, Huffman, and their team is there. And we'll see you next week right here on GWATA TV.
Since 1999, GWATA has served as North Central Washington's Tech Alliance. As a 501c3, our mission is to bring people and technology resources together to create a thriving community. Through our work, we aim to inspire, engage, and connect.